Over 2,500 years ago, in ancient northern India, where modern-day Nepal is located, a figure emerged who would challenge conventional understanding of wealth, power, and happiness. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, but the world would come to know him as the Buddha. His story begins when the noble Suddhodana, king of the Shakya clan, and his wife struggled to have a male heir to succeed him. One night, Queen Maya had a dream in which she was visited by a great white elephant with 6 tusks. The kingdom's priest declared that this was a highly auspicious sign. Queen Maya was finally pregnant, and her child was destined to become a great leader. The queen gave birth to her son while on a journey. As she walked through the beautiful gardens of Lumbini, clutching the branch of a tree, she brought her son into the world. The child that was born was extraordinarily beautiful, and a radiant aura seemed to surround him. Without a doubt, this was a special child. A great sage named Asita was called to meet the baby, and upon seeing him, the sage began to cry. When asked why he was crying, he explained that the prince was destined to achieve true liberation, something the sage had spent his entire life searching for. But the sage, already advanced in age, would not live to see the prince reach his destiny, and thus would never find the answers he had long sought. Asita also told the king that this child would not be the heir he so desperately desired to take his place on the throne, for he would leave the palace in search of truth. The prince, Siddhartha Gautama, was raised completely shielded from the outside world, as his father feared that his son's destiny might pull him away from the kingdom. When Siddhartha reached the age to marry, many young princesses were introduced to him, and he chose Yashodhara, known for her beauty and grace. The king gifted the couple with 3 magnificent palaces, one for the summer, another for the monsoon season, and a winter palace. They were known as the Palaces of the 3 Pleasures, where the couple had access to all material goods for a life of luxury, lacking nothing. The couple was later blessed with a healthy son named Rahula, much to the king's delight, as the royal succession was now secured. Finally, the king allowed his son to leave the palace walls to see the kingdom he would one day rule. However, the prince's journey was carefully planned so that he wouldn't encounter any of the world's miseries. Yet, despite being surrounded by the beauty of the world, Siddhartha came across a man stricken with a terrible illness. He had never seen such a thing and was deeply troubled, realizing that those he loved could also fall victim to such diseases. He also encountered elderly people so frail that their strength had nearly left them, leading him to reflect on the inevitability of aging and death. Siddhartha Gautama was overwhelmed, struggling to comprehend how people could live with the looming possibility of death always present. Then he saw a homeless man, seemingly poor, yet carrying himself with unshakable dignity, full of confidence and peace. The prince approached the ascetic, and the man explained that he had renounced his life of comfort in search of freeing his spirit from the suffering of the world. Back at the palace, Prince Siddhartha couldn't stop thinking about the words of the ascetic. Suddenly, his destiny became clear to him. He must renounce his life of luxury and set out on a spiritual quest. So under the cover of night, Siddhartha Gautama, hiding from his father, fled the palace to begin his mission of self-discovery. His first act was to rid himself of all objects that tied him to royalty. He cut off his beautiful, long hair, which he had always treasured, but which was nothing more than a symbol of vanity. Siddhartha also exchanged his silk garments for simple robes like those worn by people who lived in the forest. Now he was alone, far from the flattery of his wealthy court. Siddhartha Gautama had renounced everything that linked him to his former life and wandered the world in search of those who could help him reach his goal. Under the guidance of Alara Kalama, Siddhartha learned the art of meditation and mastered the state of nothingness, where the mind distances itself from material perceptions and perceives only the infinite. Despite finding this lesson valuable, Siddhartha did not believe it was the key to achieving enlightenment. He then meditated under the guidance of Uddaka Ramaputta, who taught him new meditation techniques that further refined his self-reflection. Although grateful for the lessons, Siddhartha concluded that this knowledge was useful, but still not sufficient. Siddhartha Gautama then traveled to the kingdom of Magadha, where he joined a group of ascetics who had also renounced the comforts of life to live simply. They were convinced that if anyone were to achieve enlightenment, it would be Siddhartha Gautama. Together with the ascetics, Siddhartha learned to overcome the suffering of his body caused by pain and hunger. He fully mastered his body and senses, and nothing could disturb him. However, as he ate less and less, he became increasingly frail. This period of the Buddha's life would later be known as the 6-year fast. But Siddhartha realized that his frailty was doing him more harm than good, distancing him from the path to enlightenment, as even his reasoning was being affected. He ended his fast by accepting a bowl of rice milk from a farmer's daughter, a decision that led to his rejection by the ascetics, who believed he had abandoned the proper path. After the Great Fast, Siddhartha Gautama reflected and realized that extremes were not beneficial, and he must choose the middle way, avoiding both indulgence and extreme austerity. Siddhartha came to believe that both in spiritual practice and in life in general, the key was to find balance. After years of wandering and learning, Siddhartha came upon a beautiful fig tree, which would later become known as the Bodhi tree. Beneath its shade, Siddhartha Gautama declared that he would sit and not rise until he had achieved enlightenment. He made a cushion of grass and leaves and sat, facing east. He began his meditation, and the spirits of the world rejoiced, but the demons would not allow a mere mortal to break free from the chains of the material world. Mara, the demon of desire and illusion, appeared to distract Siddhartha from his goal. He tried to tempt Siddhartha with visions of beautiful women and even attempted to frighten him with scenes of violence. But neither fear nor desire could shake Siddhartha Gautama's focus. Mara then challenged Siddhartha to find someone who could testify to his right to enlightenment. Siddhartha touched the earth with his hand, declaring that the very ground beneath him was his witness. And so, on a full moon night, Siddhartha Gautama overcame ignorance and suffering. After recalling his past lives, understanding the cycle of birth and death as governed by karma, and finally grasping the Four Noble Truths, the path to the cessation of suffering, he attained enlightenment. At dawn, Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, the awakened one. He emerged from his meditation fully enlightened, having understood the true nature of reality, the cause of suffering, and the path to liberation. He remained under the Bodhi tree for more than 7 weeks, absorbing and contemplating the depth of his experience before setting out to spread his teachings. After attaining enlightenment, now as the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama's mission was to help others discover the path to end their suffering. Knowing that most people weren't ready to receive such profound knowledge, he sought out those who were, remembering his former companions, the ascetics. At first, they greeted him with suspicion, believing that he had abandoned his quest when he broke his fast. But they soon realized the man before them was not the same. He radiated peace, love, and compassion. The central theme of the Buddha's teachings was the Four Noble Truths, which became one of the foundational elements of Buddhist practice. The first truth is dukkha, the truth of suffering. This truth states that life is inherently unsatisfactory and filled with suffering. This doesn't mean life is only suffering, but that all conditioned aspects of existence carry an inherent unsatisfactoriness. This includes the suffering of pain, illness, and death, but also the subtler suffering of impermanence and the dissatisfaction that comes with existence. The second truth is samudaya, the origin of suffering. This truth identifies the cause of suffering, desire or attachment. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from our insatiable cravings for pleasure, existence, and non-existence. This craving is rooted in ignorance. The third truth is nirodha, the cessation of suffering. This truth declares that it is possible to end suffering. The cessation of suffering is achieved through nirvana, a state of complete and final liberation from suffering. Nirvana is not a place but a state of being, a realization beyond the limits of conditioned existence. It represents the end of attachment, hatred, and ignorance. The fourth truth is magga, the path to the cessation of suffering. This truth presents a method for achieving the end of suffering. The Noble Eightfold Path, which consists of right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These truths became the central tenets of Buddhist doctrine. With the help of his disciples, more and more people began to follow the Buddhist teachings and walk the path of enlightenment. After many journeys, the Buddha eventually returned to his homeland and reunited with his aging father and his son, Rahula, who became a Buddhist monk. At the age of 80, Buddha knew it was time to prepare for his departure from this world and enter final nirvana. He lay down between two trees that began to blossom, offered his final teachings, and entered deep meditation, accessing nirvana one last time. The Buddha's body was cremated and his relics were distributed and placed in sacred monuments, which became places of veneration. Buddhism spread across the world, especially in China, Japan, and Korea. Many schools and traditions of Buddhist practice emerged, but all followed the foundational teachings of the Buddha, who revealed the path to enlightenment for those seeking liberation from suffering. Thank you for joining us on this mythological journey. From gods and heroes to the lessons they impart, we hope these ancient tales inspire your modern-day adventures. If you enjoyed today's deep dive into mythology, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another story from Wisdom of Mythology. Remember, the stories may be ancient, but their wisdom is eternal.